Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name's Richard from Global Distribution. I'm joined today by Morten from Roland, and we're really going to talk about how anyone can be a broadcaster. So everyone's heard of streaming, but streaming might, to a lot of you, refer to Netflix or Amazon or how you consume content on TV. But Morten, I think streaming has changed a lot over the last 20 years. I mean, typically people look at broadcasters, so terrestrial TV. Obviously we've moved to digital TV. The number of channels has kind of blown. We had live events such as sporting events, news, live programming, be it chat shows, etc. Which involve video switching and were typical broadcasts. But I guess over the last kind of 10 years, that's changed a lot now, and streaming has become a much sort of wider topic and covers much more markets. I mean, how do you view that expanse of who is now broadcasting and who is streaming?
Yeah, it's very much going from being a national broadcast thing to being more divided into smaller elements. So what we saw first was that some of the broadcast channels and allowances was spread out to multiple companies. We saw more and more private companies coming into play, and sports channels, obviously. So more and more providers were actually coming into play, and this has just become a natural development. Also seeing the mobile phone being able to do video recording and imaging and all this, having everything in one device. So you can actually today say that if you have a mobile phone, you can be a broadcaster as well. So you don't need any particular hardware setup to begin with. Of course, it's always good to add some equipment to improve your stuff. But as the devices that we all have, mobile phones and camera phones, can actually provide a lot of that directly, we now have a situation where anyone can be a broadcaster. So obviously from what we saw last year, there's a much bigger need for everyone to stay in contact online, and we need some social relationship with everybody. So this is a very great. I mean, if we should have lived through a pandemic situation 100 years ago, I think the situation would have been much worse. But because we can actually keep a social network with streaming and with all kinds of information sharing, because that anyone can actually be a broadcaster.
I think that's key, actually, something that you just said there. It's kind of people keeping that deliverable of information. If a pandemic happened 100 years ago, everyone would have been isolated, and you would have had minimal contact with anyone. And whereas now everyone thrives off that kind of social contact, be it watching and engaging in content and seeing people interacting, or whether it's you're interacting with someone else, be it your friends and family, or be it your colleagues, or be it your customers or your suppliers, or your audience. YouTube, I guess, has exploded over the last sort of 10 years or so, and particularly the last 5 years, the number of people that are now streaming, in all sorts of different sectors, be it they're teaching, or be it that they're, showing something that they have a passion or desire in, or whether they're community groups, or whether they're religious, institutions, etc. Everyone has that accessibility now because of platforms like YouTube. And there's obviously various different ways that people can do that. You mentioned earlier mobile phones. Anyone with a mobile phone can choose to stream that and integrate it into an application. And there's now software such as sort of OBS. So talk to me a little bit about kind of your views on OBS and how that allows people accessibility into delivering their source content, whatever it's coming from, getting that into some of these kind of streaming deliverable formats.
Yeah, you could say that OBS is actually the next step from doing a direct to YouTube or direct to Facebook Live or any other channel, because in there you will start to consider the contents, whether you want to add some graphics, you want to add some still images into your live transmission, or media playback, obviously. So this is sort of the next step from actually taking into consideration whether you should add some more cameras or add some more external equipment. So this could be considered as a sort of first step would be mobile phone situation, next step would be OBS, next step will be integrating some more hardware together with, it could be through OBS as well, and keeping that setup if the user prefers that. But that's sort of the next level of streaming situation.
And then, you know, I mean, typically, historically in broadcast, people would have had, you know, audio mixers, you have a video mixer or vision mixer, as often people will refer to it. And then obviously you've got your broadcasting element, which, as we know, has kind of evolved over the years and of how that can be done. And it's now, you know, much more, everything's digital rather than a sort of analog basis. So people are sort of starting to combine things more. You know, I guess that's the question for a user out there is, you know, I can take my mobile phone, I can do this. You know, I can say now start using free OBS software to take my source. I can buy inexpensive sort of converters that will take my video signal out of my camera or my phone and pump it into something else that can interface with my computer or can interface with something else. But it's kind of just that small bridges, but when you want to start sort of making it a bit more professional, I guess that's where taking the old principles of this sort of, you know, audio mixer in broadcast, vision mixer in broadcast, and then integrating that into streaming, I guess that's where, you know, people that want to up their game or want to expand the quality of what they're doing or kind of add more cameras and add more, you know, effects and really kind of become a professional broadcasted production. I guess that's where people can sort of leverage the technology that you guys have at Roland and the product family that you have. I mean, just give me a little bit of an overview of the type of products that Roland make in your professional audio video division.
Yeah, that's actually, you could see this as a development that you can do everything in the software of either your phone or adding some computer software. But the moment you want to go a little bit more professional, considering your light setup or multiple camera angles, combinations of these, that's where you would start to go, you could say a little bit from that perspective, a little bit step backwards and say, okay, we need to bring in some of the knowledge from the older broadcast world and bring that into the new track that we are experiencing. And that's basically what our product is doing as well, bringing those elements of controlling the audio, controlling the video, bringing that together and streaming. But from the other point, as you were mentioning, you also need to consider lighting and some background and some environment that is important for your camera to produce the best possible image. And that's where you start to go from just using your mobile phone and going a little bit more professional or semi-professional. Could be any, but also on your point that anyone can be a broadcaster. It could be like a wedding where you need to, or you would like to add some older family members that maybe are not able to travel, at least they are not right now, but also in the future it could be because of age. So you could level your broadcast many different ways. It could be professionally. But
yeah, that's it. I mean, I guess it's the principle that taking that step from sort of just streaming with a mobile phone, you can, use a DSLR or mirrorless camera or any kind of, which a lot of people will already have. And then certainly it's something that, pro video cameras, little small camcorders with built-in zoom lenses, very, very inexpensive. There's a very easy stepping stone technology-wise to add to your camera setup or add cameras to your setup. Put that into a little mixer that can handle, multiple sources, as well as then giving you some additional audio options for, attaching like a lapel mic or a nice studio mic, etc. To really improve the quality of your sound too. And that's facilitated in a lot of the kit that's available now at very, very affordable prices, be it, kind of 2 camera switching or 4 camera switching, etc. And then the next step is just, how you interface that to deliver the stream. So typically someone could just buy, a small adapter, which is HDMI to USB, plug that into the computer to get that stream in there for their deliverable source. Or whether you then start looking at, what you guys offer in this sort of all-in-one devices where you have all 3 elements in a single product. You've got your audio inputs, you've got your HDMI inputs, and then you've got your kind of streaming output as well. So I guess for people, growing through this, there's, various different options of how they can evolve and how they can grow and how they can essentially step up to do what is needed of them next.
And it's as you say, there's a technology-wise, there's this stepping stone possibility that would take you to the next level. So you could easily start with a very simple setup and then build a more advanced setup, considering all the elements separately. And what we are doing also in our equipment is the smallest devices that we're producing, we are thinking about close distance. So we are assuming that will be like either a one-man setup or maybe a small room with short distance to the devices. So that's our reason for using HDMI as our preferred camera interface, because it's less expensive to add scalers, full functional scalers to an HDMI input rather than SDI. But we have this different options. If we go a little higher up in our assortment as well, we are starting to introduce SDI inputs, which is basically if you grow your setup or the need for your setup to include longer distances, that's where we start to use different interfaces and converters and stuff like that. Includes that all into the setup. So starting from the very simple, just one device, and expanding into a more and more professional environment is a roadmap.
And looking back over the last sort of 12 months, and the majority of 2020 and certainly now into 2021, the type of customers that are now streaming, we've touched on this a little bit so far, but we've seen churches, places of worship, etc., kind of moving to a more streamlined. You sort of mentioned weddings earlier as well, and certainly through last year where weddings were permitted, but were in very small, restricted kind of numbers, that streaming products, particularly products that Roland make, really provided that versatility for the sort of wider audience that couldn't physically attend to actually have that kind of better experience, rather than a few people sort of waving their mobile phone around trying to capture stuff. A professional, wedding videographer, photographer, etc., can take this technology now because it's affordable, it's not expensive, it's small, it's portable. Take that to a location and take those feeds from several computers and just give that engagement to the people watching it remotely of what is actually going on with the live event. You know, I know that we've kind of worked with a photographer that does a lot of weddings, whose business was notably affected, who's really started to embrace this way of working, and certainly sees this hybrid event as something big going forward. But also certainly now in periods where there's been, you know, tighter lockdowns with sort of no engagement, no weddings permitted. You know, I know that he's used products like this to actually engage with his customers, particularly, you know, in that higher end. You know, so he can present to them, you know, a very professional pitch as to why they should work with him and the services that he could offer. And it's kind of almost like using the technology you're going to use for doing the broadcast to actually pitch and present, you know, what you can offer a customer. And I guess that's the same across other industries. I mean, we're seeing more and more corporate businesses, you know, doing, you know, everyone's just been doing, you know, webcam conferencing in Teams and whatever kind of conferencing software they might choose, or Zoom, etc. You know, we're so used to seeing that on TV now, you know, on the news and chat shows, this integration. But it really is a case that with the kind of products that are now out there, anyone can be doing productions of that level. You know, it's just down to the quality of the video sources you've got.
And one more thing I'd like to add is actually the user option to choose privacy as well, because if you want to include some family members to a wedding, you don't want necessarily to publish everything on YouTube, but you just want to add those people to that private event, not involving the whole community going Facebook Live or YouTube Live. So there's a choice that you can actually, from a privacy point of view, you can choose your audience yourself, going more directly, and that's actually something that we've seen lately that some corporate companies has been choosing as well, because they can establish a sort of a secure connection using their own facilities and their own servers to provide the streaming, which would be communicating corporate-wise from one branch to another, and get a worldwide coverage in their streaming without being depending on more public services, which can't provide that level of security that they need for their information sharing. So there are different levels of options for more people to choose how they want to stream. And as we started, anyone can be a broadcaster, and that can be professional, semi-professional, integrating an audience and doing corporate. It could be the flexibility, I think, is a very, very appealing thing as well.
And I guess that's it. Flexibility is key to this for anyone getting into streaming and doing live productions, you know, using multiple cameras, you know, for whatever purpose it may be. Having the flexibility of how they can work and how they can grow, and how they can, you know, expand their setup, start small, grow big, or go all in one from the off. You know, that's something that's very important for users.
For us, it's about making the products easy to operate as possible, because we are seeing more and more people that are not necessarily video professionals. They are not technical. Not that being a bad thing, but that's a challenge for making a user interface accessible, and choosing that fine compromise of choosing which buttons to put on the device and which functions to hide in a menu. So that's a fine balance, and that's the difficult part of building and developing streaming products nowadays, because it needs to be intuitive and not scaring off non-technical people.
So in terms of you know, kind of widening the actual sort of question about what is streaming today, you sort of mentioned that you now have sort of an all-in-one solution. You sort of mentioned audio mixers and switches. So for people that are kind of new to this, you know, can you elaborate a little bit more about the different elements that are required for streaming, and how you guys are combining that into these kind of all-in-one sort of solutions that people can use?
A key thing, because when we're talking about streaming today, most people think that everything is software, everything is in the computer, but it's already starting this process talking about you need a camera, you have some cables coming from the camera, you need microphones, you need ultimately an audio mixer, and you need some kind of receiving device that can handle the video input. Ultimately, you need to combine all that into the stream from either your direct streaming connection or a computer software that handles the process. So what we are doing is that we are combining these elements into one product that will take care of the audio, make that actually more complex situation, handling the synchronization between the video and the audio. Especially when we're talking about more cameras, this multiplies, because if you're using different cameras, different types of cameras, the delay of both the video signal and the microphones that you're using would be different. So for that, we need to integrate some tools, making the audio synchronized with the video. So there are a lot of elements brought together in our products. So we have one that we call AV switcher that takes care of both the audio that comes with a video signal, which could be a media playback or a video that plays back that you want to integrate in your presentation or your stream. Bring that together, video, audio, media playback in one unit, and have a single streaming up.
Because I guess that's a common problem that people have today, is that typically things where people will have had face-to-face meetings or conferences, etc., that they're now having to do that remotely. Obviously Teams has become a massive part of most businesses' sort of day-to-day process. Other conferencing software such as Zoom, there's a multitude out there. I mean, in terms of the way that people can actually stream, let's just kind of talk about that a little bit. So you guys use USB streaming, so you take an output from your devices into the computer, which effectively presents like a webcam. Is that correct?
Exactly, because you're just choosing the source of our product. So you don't need to install any drivers, you don't need to install any software to run on the computer. You're just choosing the input, and our products, our streaming products, will show up as if they were a webcam. So that's again has been a goal for us.
Yeah, so users load up their software and just select their kind of Roland, whichever product it might be, and just pick that up as a stream. And does that allow you some flexibility in delivering to multiple platforms at the same time? So if I need to broadcast on 2 or 3 different platforms at the same time, is that capable using that form of streaming integration?
It is, yeah, and that's again one of the strengths, that we are transmitting an uncompressed signal, both audio and video, and when it arrives at the computer, actually it's up to the strength of the computer and the number of applications you need to run, and you can actually divide the signal into multiple processes at the same time. So that could be a recording application running in parallel with some conference software. I know that there are integrated solutions as well, but you could choose to run that material directly into a video editing system or into a special source that will do some encoding to the signal, which could be relevant for editing the video afterwards. Or you could run actually into multiple streaming applications at the same time. You could do a conference call and do a YouTube live at the same time, if you wanted to do that. I don't know if it's practical, but you can do it. And it's all up to the computer to distribute the signals afterward.
And in terms of streaming, kind of going back to some of the kind of core fundamentals about the options available to people. I mean, a lot of sort of entry-level users, people that haven't been used to streaming, would typically maybe have a camera, be it a mirrorless camera, DSLR, or even a pro video camera, but nothing else. You know, they maybe don't even have a second camera. So what kind of options are there for people? I know there's a sort of, you know, ways of adapting that device into a computer. So, you know, what do kind of Roland offer in that space?
If you want to go directly in and let's say you only use one camera, or maybe you're using the computer camera in combination with one extra camera, then we have a small interface called UVC1, which actually takes the HDMI signal, the video signal, directly into a USB 3 stream. So cutting off all the tactile operation, but just having a direct input from the camera.
So it's really very easy for anyone that is, say, you know, doing regular Teams meetings or video conferencing within their business or with their customers, etc., to just up their video quality and their audio capabilities just by adding one of these kind of simple streaming, you know, UVC1 devices, just to replace their webcam. Effectively, you're just moving to a more professional image and video.
Exactly,
signal.
and the point is also here that you can actually go sort of gradually into this streaming setup. You don't have to start with a very high-end setup, with the most expensive setup. You can actually start with just one and say, okay, well, I would like to add a camera to this. And then you probably need to add a small switcher that could be a VO2, for instance, with just two inputs. So you can take that output and run that through the same small HDMI to USB streaming unit. So you can easily combine and actually gradually build your streaming setup. You don't have to make a huge investment day one, which is attractive for smaller communities, as you mentioned as well. It could be houses of worship. It could be small communities that want to start and see what it brings without necessarily have to make a major investment.
You know, talking about the all-in-one products that you have, you know, and key reasons why someone would maybe consider Roland. Obviously, there's a lot of people out there kind of developing products into the streaming market, but certainly from my point of view, you know, as with this session, you know, I'm running this through one of your VR1 HD products. Which is, you know, a very small compact device. I've got a little 5-inch Atomos monitor plugged in here to view it. I'm USB'd into my Mac laptop here. But it's a very simple, uncluttered kind of ergonomic feel. Is this something that sort of Roland have a very strong focus on from a design point of view?
Definitely. That's one of the key points. And that's actually the most difficult point of it, because designing a product with just a feature list, well, of course there are some technical challenges to that, but it's not as difficult just to add features as to think about how to operate the features and make use of the features, because you can have devices that has thousands of features, but no one is able to operate it because it's so difficult. If it's just menus and substructures and difficult stuff to reach. So the difficult part here is to make a tactile unit, a user interface which makes sense. That's the difficult part.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, you know, what I would find that most users would be impressed with is, you know, the ease of connectivity that you've got, the accessibility for your video inputs, you know, your audio inputs. And then, you know, as a tactile user interface, I've got, you know, volume faders here, you know, I've got my channel switching, I've got my transition options for picture-in-picture or other forms of transitions. You know, I've got my keyer here for if I want to put on my, you know, kind of lower thirds graphics, my logo, any sort of idents, etc. You know, it's very, very straightforward. It's not daunting to someone that is, you know, new to this kind of market. You know, they're not a video switcher specialist. You know, they're not cutting broadcast television. You know, they just want to cut between a few cameras within, you know, their own environment, be it, you know, a YouTube channel where they're producing their own content and teaching, be it, you know, a musician either teaching, or be it someone running their own kind of cookery channel or other kind of, you know, informative educational kind of system.
And this is something that we see internationally as, I think, as a reaction to the national broadcast stations getting less, and Flow TV getting less and less popular. The space has moved to cyberspace, you could say, that it's easier to establish yourself as a broadcaster nowadays.
Anyone can be a broadcaster. I mean, that's the key thing with this kind of technology. At, you know, the affordable price points that are coming through, is anyone now can become a broadcaster. You don't need to have tens of thousands of pounds worth of equipment. You know, if you've got a camera and a computer and a switcher. But talking about the computer, actually, just one thing that I think is kind of important for people to understand, particularly about Roland, is the architecture that you have in the hardware. You know, the use of the computer is purely from the streaming element to actually take that uncompressed stream that you talked about earlier and delivering that through the platform of choice. Everything else to do with the switcher and to control this and to set this all up is completely controllable physically here on the hardware. That's the case, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That's the case. That you can operate everything just by the local device. But of course, there are some that would like to have some kind of remote control functionality from the computer, maybe an integration with other software, or it could be networked features that takes some of the buttons or functions out of our products and remote control that from a distant button or remote controller. And that's possible as well as you can actually combine these things all together.
Yeah, so that's great. I mean, lots of flexibility for people working in teams with different control. But again, if someone is new to this and you just want super simple, you know, it's a very, very accessible piece of hardware. And you know, the other switcher only products that Roland do appear, you know, it's very much the same kind of design approach in terms of, you know, ease of ergonomics, very tactile kind of interface. So thank you very much for watching. I hope this has been informative and you've learned something about traditional broadcast, streaming, and how they are now effectively one and the same thing. So if you would like any more information about this topic, or you have any particular questions around Roland or anything else for us, then please contact us via the links below.